You knew this was coming, didn't you? It was most definitely inevitable. After watching James Gunn's Superman, the first thing I did was go watch Man of Steel, a film that I absolutely hated when it released back in the day. But as and when time passed, I began to grow fonder. Dare I say, I even started loving the film. But only once I began to understand the depth in the characters and the story that Zack Snyder wanted to tell. But the film hit differently after watching Superman 2025 because they're just so contrasting. Even though the protagonist in both films is literally the same character, the tonality, the approach, and the entire feel of the final product is so vastly different, I'd kind of agree if someone said comparing them both isn't even fair. Kind of, not completely because I'm still making the video anyway. And I think it's also fair if someone said that whether you like either or both films or not is solely based on preferences. But I'd like to point out once again that the comparison had to be made. After all, it's two of the most polarizing films ever made, both of which coincidentally are based on the last son of Krypton. So which film is truly better? To find out that answer, I had to do what was truly difficult, which was to let go of the bias I hold towards Man of Steel and Cavill especially, to then dispassionately and objectively judge the facts presented and come to a logical conclusion, even though I realize that many aspects will be judged based purely on preferences. And I've already made a spoiler-free video about James Gunn's Superman where I broke it down bit by bit in far more detail. So go watch that if you feel like I haven't spoken about many aspects of the film in this video. Oh, also there'll be a ton of spoilers in case you haven't watched the film yet, so come back once you do. But hey, here we are, so let's go already. Before we get deeper and delve into the storyline and characters, let's talk about how the film looks and the sound design first. As far as the visual aesthetic of both films go, I don't think many people will argue with me that the CGI work in Man of Steel is top notch. Even after 12 long years, not a single frame feels dated. Unfortunately, a lot of people are still stuck at the color grading part while completely ignoring the horrendous CGI work, especially during the kaiju scene in Superman 2025. First and foremost, brighter colors are a James Gunn thing, not a Superman or DC thing, so let's get that straight. The VFX in most of the scenes in Superman 2025 are pretty good though, like the Fortress of Solitude, which I particularly liked, and the Pocket Universe bits, which were really good too, but then again, not a single frame in Man of Steel is in any way even average. Every single shot, every bit of CGI from the world engine to the battle in Metropolis and Krypton as well, they're all absolutely incredible. Snyder has always been a visual maestro. You can hate on his work all you want, but the man knows how to make any scene look breathtaking. Like when Cavill's Superman took flight, it felt like we flew with him. But Gordon Sweat's wide-angle face first shots just made him look weird, which is a trademark Gunn trope. And as I said, Man of Steel came out 12 long years ago, which means with the upgrades that the industry has received in the last decade, Superman 2025 should have beaten Man of Steel hands down. But in many, in fact, most visual aspects, Superman 2025 is inferior. Man of Steel wins, no question. Now let's talk music. And I'd like to give you 3 words: Hans freaking Zimmer. A man who is without a doubt one of the best composers of not just our generation but all time. The scene where I said it felt like we flew with soups, Zimmer had a large contribution to that. Superman 2025's music on the other hand is pretty good too. Its main theme was catchy and had James Gunn's love for the 90s retro style of music splattered all over it, but it wasn't even close to Zimmer's breathtaking album. Some of his tracks from the film like Arcade, Goodbye My Son and Flight are still etched in the minds of people and have gained somewhat of a cult status along with the film itself. He defined Superman for an entire generation. Man of Steel has beaten Superman 2025 in 2 aspects already. So now let's go deeper into the topic and look at the storyline and its execution. On one hand, we have Zack Snyder's slow-burning, mature and dark take, and on the other hand, we have James Gunn's bright, heartfelt and fast-paced story. Since they're both literally polar opposites, we have to deconstruct both the plots and see which one has the least amount of flaws in its execution and narrative. I think it's clear to everyone I personally prefer Snyder's take, because not only is it totally different from literally every other comic book film, it's also connected with me on a personal level because of the way sacrifice and finding one's purpose is conveyed. But if I take all that out and focus on just the storyline, the best thing about Man of Steel is that it has somewhat of a tunnel vision. The film has one singular solitary agenda: to tell the story of Kal-El / Clark Kent. The film didn't try to lay a foundation for a shared universe, hence it didn't have a ton of important side characters, which then meant the narrative focus was strictly placed on Soups. I made a video months ago where I predicted that introducing like 6 characters in the first film is a bad idea, which is exactly what happened. Superman 2025 was all over the place because the plot was just so overstuffed. And despite being set in a time when Superman was already established in Metropolis, we didn't really get to meet Clark the reporter, an aspect that was criminally overlooked. In the comics, Clark is a dedicated reporter who tries his hardest to uncover stories and bring about change through his journalistic endeavors just as much as his Superman persona does. But Gunn completely ignored that. Oh, speaking of being ignored, Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, Jonathan and Martha Kent, Metamorpho and Perry White were all just treated as background noises for Superman's concert. The sheer lack of emphasis and screen time left a bad taste in my mouth. There was literally no explanation about the origins of the Justice Gang, no backstory for Metamorpho, no character development for Jonathan and Martha. It's like Gunn expected the audiences to just know the whole DC history by heart. And the whole Boravia vs. Jaranpur subplot, it was totally misplaced and an unnecessary storyline that tried to connect with the audiences by emulating a real-world conflict, which left no lasting impact. Also, the Ultraman bit was just so empty. A clone of the most powerful being on the planet, whose mind was ripped apart by genetic experimentation, whose sole purpose was to be a puppet to Lex's will. That opened the doors to some insane storytelling, where they could have shown us how Ultraman was tortured and bent to his will by Lex, and hence Ultraman's hate for Superman who got everything that he never did. All the doors which were firmly shut when Soups heartlessly let him fall into a black hole. And the whole twist where Jor and Lara L being some kind of psychos is concerned, I just don't think it was a good idea in any way. You see, Superman isn't the unwavering ray of hope he is because of one or two circumstances. He's basically the best case scenario, the culmination of everything going right, the combination of everything good, all of which developed a half man, half Kryptonian who was as pure as he was powerful. Jor-El was a beacon of hope on Krypton, a mastermind who fought the good fight, a trait that was then carried over to Kal. So making Jor appear as some kind of a Kryptonian Sigma male was the worst decision ever. I know there's still the looming possibility that the message itself was corrupted by Brainiac or General Zod, but to be honest, it didn't seem like Gunn planted any seeds pointing towards that being the case. And as far as Man of Steel is concerned, we can agree that there were some real issues there. An aspect that never sat well with me until recently was Clark letting Jonathan die right in front of him. I do understand now that Jonathan was just not convinced that the government would let Clark be if they found out about him, and he was also scared of Clark being exploited for his strength, which is why he chose death over Clark ousting his secret. It's very clearly narrated that Jonathan doesn't believe Clark was ready. But I never really understood why Kryptonians never left their planet despite having interstellar technology. What was that about? Made little to no sense. And also the chemistry between Lois and Clark didn't really feel organic. It just felt like Clark chose to fall for Lois as she was the only one, other than his parents of course, who he could trust with his secret. But as far as the plot goes, I really feel Superman 2025 left too much to be desired. It was a mess because of taking on too much and the fact that it's set in a weird middle-ish timeline where everything is already happening didn't really help. It almost made me feel like I skipped the first 30 minutes of the film. So once again, Man of Steel wins. And now for the big ones. Superman and Lois. I'd like to state here that one of the biggest reasons, like 80% of the reason why Superman 2025 felt as good as it did was because of David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan's incredible portrayals and on-screen chemistry. The only gripe I have about Supes in the film was his subpar costume, but boy oh boy did Dave bring Superman to life. You can really see the Boy Scout in Clark shining through, something that was sorely missing in Man of Steel, which would have been terribly misplaced considering the dark tone of the film. But Superman in this film is truly the embodiment of hope. You know, this Superman really felt like he cared about life. Doesn't matter if it's a human being, a tiny little squirrel, or a large monster attacking the city, he wants everyone to live. Finally, a portrayal where we could see the man in Superman. And although the film didn't shine any light on Clark's journalistic side, it more than compensated for it by giving us an almost perfect Lois. She doesn't just want to be living in the shadow of Soups, she wants to bring an honest and more often than not the most sensible take to every persistent issue. But Cavill's Superman is one who's still finding his place in this world. The idea, I think, was to give us a Clark/Kal who just doesn't feel like he belonged. His home planet was destroyed, Earth was alien to him, he saw both extreme kindness and hate as he grew up, and amidst all of this, he just felt like a guy trying to do the right thing while slowly understanding his own origins. I think we saw a way more human version of Clark in Batman v Superman than we did here. But it was totally understandable as the journey itself was the story of the film. But guess what? I love Henry's version of Superman. I think it's about time superhero movies stop downplaying the extremes that the very existence of such a being would bring about. So this brutally realistic take is what most people love about Man of Steel. It doesn't shy away from the bad side of humanity, just as it doesn't try to give us a perfect world. And Amy Adams herself did a terrific job with Lois. Once again, we see the fierce reporter who wants to drag a story out by the hair. I think there wasn't much of a difference between the portrayal by Adams and Brosnahan because they were both almost perfect. This one is a tie. So after looking at all the aspects carefully and breaking them down, I think there's no doubt Man of Steel wins. I know for a fact that a lot of people are gonna dislike the video just because of the verdict, and they're probably gonna call me a part of the Snyder cult, even though I know they couldn't argue against the facts presented. I'm a big fan of many of Snyder's movies, there's no doubt about it. And I also want you to understand that that doesn't mean I'm saying Superman 2025 is a bad film by any means. It has heart and two fantastic leads, but Man of Steel, it's the kind of film that stays with you. It's not like it stood the test of time for no reason. Now that I've said all of that, let the war in the comments section begin. In the meantime, I'm gonna go eat some coconut cake.